This video covers the topic about signal transmissions in brain. How the message that transfer from one region, one human organ to the brain. We'll discuss in this chapter. Now, let us discuss about the signal transmission in brain. How the signal transmission happens in the brain. The brain consists of a neuron. A neuron or a neural cell is the fundamental units of a nervous system. So the neurons are responsible for receiving, processing, and transmitting. Both all these signals or the things happens. Receiving, processing, transmitting electrical and the chemical signals within the nervous system. So this phase is observed in the neurons. So the brain consists of a bundle of neurons, and these neurons are responsible for receiving, processing, and transmitting electrical and chemical signal within the nervous system. They communicate as well as coordinate between different parts of the body. So, and mediate various physiological as well as a cognitive process. That means what the action we are showing that all that take place in the neuron. The following steps are involved in a signal transmission in the brain. The first is a neuron usually receives a signal from other neuron in the form of a neurotransmitter molecule. Here we will consider two neurons. One neuron send a signal to the other neurons. So that means a neuron receives a signal from another neuron in the form of a neurotransmitter molecules. See, these neurotransmitters are the transported from neuron to neuron through dendrites. You may observe a small area called it as dendrites. Each neuron consists of a dendrites. See, the neurons are consists of dendrites. So these are the dendrites. See, this is connected with this is a dendrites is linked with another neurons. So the transmission of signal from this neuron to another neuron takes place through dendrites. See, the neurotransmitter molecules are transported from neuron to neuron through dendrites. The dendrites are branch-like extension in the neurons cell body. They have a special structure called dendritic spines with a large surface area that contains receptor for neurotransmitter. Here it contains nucleus as well as they possess a dendritic spines with a large surface area that contains receptors for neurotransmitter. They receive signal. These neurotransmitter molecules, they receive incoming signal in the form of neurotransmitter molecules released from neighboring neuron and transmit them towards the other neurons cell body in the form of electrical signal. So these takes the signal dendrimers and then it's sent to the cell body, that is in the form of electrical signal. And the cell body, what we observed, it is the main part of the neuron that contains nucleus and other cellular organelles. It is responsible for maintaining the cell metabolic function. Cell becomes active if a cell body is present. It integrates incoming signals. So they'll take the incoming signal. Usually it received taken by the dendrites, whether the signals are strong enough or to generate an outgoing signals, and generating, if it is strong enough, it will generate an outgoing signal. So the first, a neuron receives signal from one other neuron in the form of neurotransmitter molecules. The neurotransporter from neuron to, they transport signal from one neuron to another neuron through dendrites. See, these neurons containing a cell body, it is the main part of the neuron They contains a nucleus as well as some other cellular organelles, and it integrates the incoming signals and determines whether that signal is strong enough to generate an outgoing signals, and then if it is strong enough, it will generate some outgoing signals. And these signals, outgoing signals, they from the neuron cell body, it will from the neuron cell body is called as action potential. That means this neuron cell body may generates a signal response. It may respond or it may not. Okay, if it is response, that is the action potential. Okay, it will give some action, and this action potential is like a brief electrical impulse. It is a brief electrical impulse, and this action potential is transmitted along the axon. If action potential is generated, and that generated action potential is passed or transmitted along the axon. That axon is nothing but a long cylinder projection of the neuron. Axon is responsible for transmitting signal over a long distance to other targeting neuron cells. So one neuron to another neuron, there is a transmission of signal take place. That gives whether the signal is a potential one or a signal is a strong enough. If it is a strong enough, then cell body of the that is a nucleus that generates action potential, and this action potential travel along over a long distance to target the other neuron cell, such as muscles or a glands. The axon is usually covered by a myelin, a fatty insulating substance that helps to speed up the conduction of electrical impulse. So at the end, it will travel through this, and it will end to the nerve ending. So here the muscle fibers, then here what we observe, the nerve ending. At the end of the axon, there is a specialized structure called it as axon terminal. So this is a one axon terminal we'll observe. When the action potential reaches this axon terminal, it will reaches its axon terminal, it triggers and releases neurotransmitter to the synapse. So it will transport or it will give signals to the synapse. Synapse is a junction between the present neuron to the next neuron. So here it is a synapse area. So it is nothing but a signal transmitter. A synapse is a junction between the present neuron to the next neuron. This allows the communication between one neuron to the other neuron. When the action potential reaches the axon terminal, that will triggers and releases the neurotransmitter to the synapse. The synapses are the point of communication between one neuron cell to the next targeting cell. At the terminal of the one neuron cell, neurotransmitter releases. This is a axon terminal. So here the release of neurotransmitter is observed, and this released neurotransmitter diffuses across the synapse. At the end or at the beginning of the target cell, neurotransmitters are received by the neurotransmitter receptor. Here it will releases with the help of a synapse, and the synaptic gap is present, and here we may observe the neurotransmitter or the neurotransmitter receptor. It will receive the signals. The diffuses across the synapse. At the end, at the beginning of the target cell, neurotransmitter are received by the neurotransmitter receptor. So these neurotransmitters generate electric potential in the target cell. So this process of conversion of chemical signals from one neurotransmitter to the electrical and vice versa repeats. So the action potential travel from one cell to another cell, allowing the continuous of signal transmission throughout the neural circuit. See here we will consider two neurons. From one neuron to another neuron, the signal transmission takes place with the help of the junction called synapse. Okay, then a neuron is nothing but a sending a signal. Okay, that is what we call it as a pre-synaptic neuron. Sending a signal, pre-synaptic neuron releases a chemical called neurotransmitter, and that neurotransmitter binds to receptor to the surface of receiving. That is a post-synaptic neuron. So that means one neuron gives signal to another neuron in the ways in such a way that that signal sending called as a presynaptic neuron, it releases neurotransmitter, and that neurotransmitter binds to a receptor on the surface of the receiving neuron. So neurotransmitter are released from presynaptic terminal, which may branch to communicate with the several post-synaptic neuron. It need not to bind with the one post-synaptic neuron. It may bind with any number of post-synaptic neuron. Axon terminals are where neurotransmissions begins. Here the neurotransmission begins. Hence it is an axon terminals where the neuron sends its output to the other neuron. So an electrical synapse, the output will be electrical signal itself. If this is a chemical synapse, the output will be a neurotransmitter. The correct outline for the sequence of transmission of electrical impulse through a neuron is dendrites, cell body, axon, terminal. This is a correct sequence of the transmission of electrical impulse through a neuron. That is dendrites, then cell body, axon and axon terminal. This process of transmitting information from one neuron to another neuron is known as synaptic transmission and forms the basis of communication within the brain. This forms the basis for communication within the body. This is about how the neuron signal transmission or the brain, the signal transmission is observed in the brain. Thank you.